You can speak.
All right, go ahead.
All right, finally. Just the right elevation.
Here we go. Hello, everyone. This is the Fifth Ethical Revelation Fellowship. I'm Dr. Roger Paul, and we have several people with us here today. I'm not going to name off everyone. Today we're going to study paper 133 in the Rancher book. Let me get the papers up here first. I can tell you the pages on that in just 1 second. All right. See if I can turn this on. And that starts on page 1468, the first paragraph. And dear, would you forward this side for me as we go through it? You mind doing that? Go ahead and put it on the first page. There we go. Return from Rome. Let's say a little prayer and we'll get started. Father, thank you for bringing us together today in our home. We thank you for the many blessings that you've given us this week. We pray that you'll open our hearts and our minds that we might remember some of the teaching of Jesus from this lesson today, and that we might share it with others, that they might benefit from it also. We thank you and we give you the praise in your Son's name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, return from Rome. Let me get, there we go. This is the pathway that, one change here, that Jesus took on his trip through Rome. If I can find my little mouse here, I'm going to make this large. Here we go. All right. And this is where he began in his whole trip through Rome. This is on our Atlanta Enriched study group site and the Fifth Ethical Revelation study group site. And for you people at home that are listening to this, all these slides are on both those websites, the Atlanta Urantia Studygroup.org and Fifth Ethical Revelation .com. And you can find all these slides, both the ones without the pictures and the ones with the pictures. The -2 are the ones with the pictures. So you can download these at your leisure, and they're right underneath the lesson you're listening to, if you're listening to this tape. Okay, return from Rome. Diane, would you like to start tonight?
When preparing to leave Rome, Jesus said goodbye to none of his friends. The scribe of Damascus appeared in Rome without announcement and disappeared in like manner. It was a full year before those who knew and loved him gave up hope of seeing him again. Before the end of the second year, small groups of those who had known him found themselves drawn together by their common interest in his teachings and through mutual memory of their good times with him. All these small groups of Stoics, Cynics, and mystery cultists continued to hold these irregular and informal meetings right up to the time of the appearance in Rome of the first preachers of the Christian religion.
Okay. So notice here that Jesus did not tell anyone he was leaving. What do you think that would be? You know how personable Jesus was. Think about this. He did not want anyone to grow an attachment to him in his bestowal, right? So he left without fanfare, because if he would have let all his friends know he was leaving, they would have wanted to throw a party for him and made a big deal out of it, right?
And follow him probably as well.
Probably try to follow him as well.
I suspect he wanted to be alone, he wanted to be his own, it was not a public mission.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
That's it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But notice here that they also mention the Stoics and Cynics and mystery cults, right? And each one of those, he met people and influenced during his time there. And they also, he prepared the way for those who came after him. Who would that be? That would be Peter and Paul, wouldn't it? Right? So he made he in essence planted the seeds, made the ground fertile for those who were coming after him, so that everything would be prepared for him to come, or for the message to be spread after he left, right? y'all excuse me while I'm doing this, something in the background here. I forgot to download this lesson on this particular computer in front of me. So, and it's slow. All right, Pam, would you take the next paragraph, please?
Ganid and Ganid had purchased so many things in Alexandria and Rome that they sent all their belongings on ahead by pack train to Tartantum, while the three travelers walked leisurely across Italy over the great Alpine Way. On this journey they encountered all sorts of human beings. Many noble Roman citizens and Greek colonists lived along this road, but already the progeny of great numbers of inferior slaves were beginning to make their appearance.
Okay, and while they're talking about the progeny of the inferior slaves, those who had not mixed with the violet blood, okay, from Adam and Eve. And so they were slow of mind and slow of spiritual adaptation, right? So it made it hard for them to understand the concepts of spiritual things. So in that, it made them hard for them to understand. I wanted to point out this other picture here too. This is the other picture I have of the trip from Rome all the way back to Antioch, or Caesarea, I think it was. And that's in the slides too. Okay. Let's go to the next commercial business. Okay. Number 3. Mom, did you want to read?
One day, while resting at lunch about halfway to Tarentum, Ganid asked Jesus a direct question as to what he thought of India caste system. Said Jesus, though human beings differ in many ways one from another before God and in the spiritual world, all mortals stand on a equal footing. There are only two groups of mortals in the eyes of God, those who desire to do his will and those who do not. As the universe looks upon an inhabited world, it likewise discerns two great classes, those who know God and those who do not. Those who cannot know God are reckoned among the animals of any given realm. Mankind can appropriately be divided into many classes in accordance with different qualifications as they may be viewed physically, mentally, socially, vocationally, or morally, but as these different classes of morals appear before the judgment bar of God, they stand on an equal footing. God is truly no respecter of persons, although you cannot escape the recognition of differential human abilities and endurance in matters intelligently, socially, and moral. You should make no such distinctions in the spiritual brotherhood of man who assembles by worship in the presence of God.
Okay, so as far as God's concerned, there are no classes, right? There is an upper, middle, lower class. There's no those that do not have intellectual abilities and those who do not, right? So even on the previous paragraph when we were talking about those beings who are not capable of understanding things, to God, they are just on a same equal footing as we are, right? The only difference between people as far as God is concerned is those who want to do his will and those who do not want to do his will. That's the only two types of person, okay? And
the progeny of the inferior slaves.
Progeny of the inferior slaves.
They were incapable of...
They may be incapable, some of them were incapable of spiritual concepts, okay? But that does not mean that they cannot, choose to do the will of God. So even though they were born without the ability for spiritual things, they still could be fused with a sun fragment and become a local universe inhabitant, right?
Well,
so it depends on whether they choose to do the will of God, even though they don't have a good spiritual understanding or concept of these things, right? That's why, you know, when you go to churches and things like this and you see really backward people that believe in God, those people are going to end up in the mansion world just like we are. You know, just because they're a little bit more mentally slow, as long as they have that thought adjuster, you know, when they get that thought adjuster at 5 years old, they make that first moral decision. That thought adjuster comes, and they're on equal footing just with everyone else, right? But there is a class of people, it says here, who cannot know God. In other words, they cannot understand God. They cannot grasp a concept of God. And they are reckoned among the animals of any given realm. Now, why would that be? Because an animal cannot perceive God first. He can't, what's the last two adjutants? Worship and wisdom. They do not have the function of worship and wisdom. And if they do not have that, then they're on the same footing as an animal.
But they have the 5 adjunct spirits, which,
But they have the five
which is
adjutants.
love, courage.
That's right. That's right. And, okay, just because they cannot know God does not mean that they may not choose God. You see what I'm saying? But if they do not ever make that decision, will they survive? No, they won't. You understand that?
Well, one thing is, so there is the class of those who desire
Yeah.
and do, and those who don't.
Those
right?
right.
Now, among those who don't, there are those who can but choose not to,
Yeah.
and there are those who cannot.
Cannot choose.
Right? So there are kind of, among the second class, there are 2 classes.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think that we can say those slaves they were talking about in the previous paragraph are all in the third category of those who
They're
cannot.
not. They're
Right?
not.
So, between those who cannot and those who can, and among those who can, there are those who have high intellect and can go further
Yes.
than those who have a lower intellect. But it looks to me that whether you have a low intellect or a high intellect, and which is going to dictate, and also the social and environment,
Yeah.
right? That also plays an important role in terms of your achievement on the planet.
Mhm.
It seems to me, if I understand correctly, that in the eternity, it doesn't affect the destiny,
Yeah.
right?
It
So
doesn't.
we all go so which means we probably it's going to be very hard for us to make the distinction between those who are incapable
Mhm.
and those who are and have but have just lower achievement than others because of more fortunate circumstances, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So they might stay in the mansion world for, you know, thousands
Very
of
long time.
thousands of years while you would progress to, you know, the first level spirit. You know,
The Jewish
No,
people,
perhaps.
I know, I just,
the Jewish people believe that Jesus has not come to earth yet. They don't
Well, they
believe in
believe
Jesus.
the Messiah has not come.
Yes, Messiah.
Yeah.
And what about them? They really believe this, and they won't. You cannot talk them out. You can't tell them anything. They won't
No,
listen.
But Mom,
Do you think
if
that-
they believe in God the Father,
Yeah,
if they have
they
a
do that.
relationship
Most
with
of them
God the
do.
Father, they will end up on that first mansion world.
Okay, that's
Okay.
what I was wondering.
Yeah, they will end up on the first mansion world, but before they can get out of Salvington, what do they have to do? They have to
Acknowledge.
recognize,
Acknowledge Jesus.
yes, as their creator, right? Creator Son. So, and you remember when Jesus many times talked to the Jews, many of them he called lost, right? Because they closed off their mind to the will of God.
Mhm.
That's what really determines whether you're going to make it to the mansion world, is if you are dedicated to doing the will of God, you're going to get there. You know, if Jesus had never come, you will make it to the mansion world if you believe in God, basically, right? But when they get to that mansion world, to go through those 7 mansion worlds, to fuse with your adjuster, you have to believe in Christ as your creator and as the Son of God, because he is. You know, not believing is what? Cosmic insanity, right? That would be not believing in what created you, you know, because Jesus and the creative Mother Spirit created us, right? God is our Father, but it was His Son that actually created us, right? The gift from God is what? Adjuster, which we fuse. Right?
May I make a little comment on that?
Yeah.
I've always felt somewhat uncomfortable with a standard Christian who comes and says, "Do you believe in Jesus or you don't? You want to be saved? You got to believe in Jesus." The problem that I have is that the belief, you can believe it in a dead way. Right? You can say, "Oh yeah, I believe in Jesus. It's written in the Bible,"
Yeah.
and then do all the crap and not care about not doing the real work, the spiritual work.
Yeah.
To me, it's meaningless.
Yeah.
So to me, believing in Jesus is not about saying, "Okay, amen, Jesus, you are the Son of God, amen."
Yeah.
I don't think. I mean, in my view, that's the way I prefer is that you seek the truth,
Yeah.
and then if you seek the truth and your intellect and your environment is adequate, you are going to have unconscious influence from your thought adjuster and the spirit of truth. And you are going to grow in love, in service, with loving people, and you are going to grow in spiritual insight.
Yeah.
And I think when you get that as you grow in that spiritual insight, and when the time comes to get more familiar with Jesus and Christ Michael, then you recognize. But I think it's an internal process of spiritual growth,
Yeah.
and with love and acting upon it in every day of your life, that
Yeah.
this naturally comes out,
Yeah.
as opposed to say, "No, you got to believe. I don't know anything about it." Go, "Yeah, so a few things, great." It can be dead. I'm saying it can be dead, and that's
Well,
the.
you know, our concept of salvation is different than what Jesus' concept of salvation was. Jesus' concept of salvation that he taught over and over and over again was what? The fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. He never went out and said, "If you don't believe in me, you will not make it," period. He says, "No man comes by the Father but by me." Not the same
That's
thing.
not the same thing. Yes.
That's right. He's stating that in order, and for you to get out of the local universe, or the universe of, or out of Nebadon, okay, out of Salvington, past Salvington, to become a first stage spirit, you have to recognize Jesus. You have to recognize Michael as your creator. Okay, but everything he taught on earth, the definition of salvation was what? The definition of salvation is believing in the fatherhood of God and brotherhood of man. And Diane pointed out something to me this week we need to mention, and that is, it's the sisterhood of man too. Okay? When they say the brotherhood of man, they're not just talking about men. They're talking about men and women, right? So you have to believe that everyone is your brothers and sisters, and that God is your Father. That is salvation, right? And your willingness to follow the indwelling thought adjuster leading you. That is salvation. Not believing that Christ died for your sins. I know you Baptists are going to hate me out there. That's not the key to heaven. The key to heaven is believing that God is your Father and all brothers and sisters are your men.
The people that Giles is
everyone
talking
is your
about
brother and
think that Jesus died for their sins, and therefore, if they believe in Jesus, they can sin, and he's already paid the price.
Yeah.
They don't understand he didn't die for their sins. He lived for their sins. He
Yeah.
lived to save them. If you just read what he said and follow it, then you're saved.
Yeah.
Well,
I-
the word, excuse me.
I don't know how big the movement is, but I've met quite a few people that are Jews for Jesus.
Mhm.
You've heard of that?
Yeah. Yeah.
They
And-
recognize Jesus.
Well, you know, many of the Jews during the time of Jesus believed Jesus was a prophet regardless. You know, they didn't believe he was the Son of God, but they believed he was a prophet.
Even
Okay.
Islam believes that Jesus
Yeah.
is a prophet.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Muslims believe that Jesus was a prophet. I think just about every group of religious thinkers believes that Jesus was a prophet of some type. You know.
I'm not sure about the Buddhism and Hinduism.
I think the Buddhists believe that too.
Really?
You know, yeah, I believe they do. So the problem is we're going to, well, we just studied that last week, how the Buddhists, because of their lack of a fatherhood of God, are just outside of salvation because they don't believe that God is their father.
But
Right?
we found out that early in the Buddhist movement, The Buddha did speak
He
of God.
did believe in God. That's
He
right.
spoke of God.
Yeah, that's right.
Today they don't.
Today they
It's
don't.
all. It's like Christianity. They don't talk about God. They talk about Jesus.
Yeah,
And that's what the Buddhists do. They talk about Buddha,
yeah. All
not
right,
God.
let's keep going, dear. Mercy and justice. Jill, would you take this one?
A very interesting incident occurred one afternoon by the roadside as they neared Tarentum. They observed a rough and bullying youth brutally attacking a smaller lad. Jesus hastened to the assistance of the assaulted youth, and when he had rescued him, he tightly held on the offender until the smaller lad had made his escape. The moment Jesus released the little bully, Ganid pounced upon the boy and began soundly to thrash him, and to Ganid's astonishment, Jesus promptly interfered. After he had restrained Ganid and permitted the frightened boy to escape, the young man, as soon as he got his breath, excitedly exclaimed, "I cannot understand you, teacher. If mercy requires that you rescue the smaller lad, doesn't justice demand the punishment of the larger and offending youth?"
Okay, and let's just go on to the next. This is another picture of the trail they took. Let's go on to the next one here. This is what Jesus said.
Gannon, it is true, you do not understand. Mercy ministry is always the work of the individual, but justice punishment is the function of the social, government, or universe administrative groups. As an individual, I am beholden to show mercy. I must go to the rescue of the assaulted lad, and in all consistency, I may employ sufficient force to restrain the aggressor. And that is just what I did. I achieved the deliverance of the assaulted lad. That was the end of mercy. That was the end of mercy ministry. Then I forcibly detained the aggressor a sufficient length of time to enable the weaker party to the dispute to make his escape, after which I withdrew from the affair. I did not proceed to sit in judgment on the aggressor, thus to pass upon his motive, to adjudicate all that entered into the attack upon his fellow, and then undertake to execute the punishment which my mind might dictate as just recompense for his wrongdoing. Granted, mercy may be lavish, but justice is precise. Cannot you discern that no two persons are likely to agree as to the punishment which would satisfy the demands of justice? One would impose 40 lashes, another 20, while still another would advise solitary confinement as a just punishment. Can you not see that on this world such responsibilities had better rest upon the group to be administered by chosen representatives of the group? In the universe, judgment is vested in those who fully know the antecedents of all wrongdoing as well as its motivation. In civilized society and in an organized universe, the administration of justice presupposes the passing of just sentences consequent upon fair judgment, and such prerogatives are vested in the judicial groups of the worlds and in all-knowing administrators of the higher universes of all creation.
Okay, there's three things in this paragraph that he basically takes on. Okay, first is judgment, mercy, and his keeping from getting involved in any violent situation, right? First of all, let's think of what Jesus did. He restrained the lad. This is a perfect example of a perfect police department, isn't it? It's not the police department's job to issue out justice, is it? It's not their duty to issue out punishment, is it? You know, so what their job is to restrain people and bring them up to what? Judgment. It's a perfect police motto right here. Jesus did the exact same thing. He would not stand by and let someone innocent be persecuted, right? That's what people have to do. That's what governments have to do. right? Sometimes we have to strain people to keep them from hurting other people, and sometimes governments has to restrain other governments to keep them from hurting people, right? So that's his motto here. Now Jesus restrained a couple people in his life just in this such manner, but he only restrained them to the point where they could not do what? Any more harm. Okay, and then the next thing he brings up here is mercy. The mercy of the universe, right? The mercy, who is the being of mercy?
Eternal.
The eternal Son, right? Love and mercy. Okay, then he also brings up the judgment of the universe. And this gives us an example of how the entire universe judges mortals, judges each other, right? They do this as a group, not as individuals, but as a group. All the way up to whom? The Ancients of Days. There's always 3 Ancients of Days. It always takes 3 Ancients of Days to determine what? An elimination of life, right? So all the judgment arm of the universe always has at least what? 3 being involved. The traveling courts of the universe, it's the same thing, right? Okay, and we all have representation just like we do in our courts here. You have, like attorneys, we have representation when we go before the courts of the universe. So, Jesus himself does not judge these people. Do you see that? He does not judge them even at Salvington. The only thing he does is he certifies them that they're spiritually fit to go on to what? The first spirit level. Okay? If it is a determining factor that it needs judged, what does he do? He kicks it up to the courts of the universe, which is the Ancients of Days. Right? But he does decide if you have a right to survive. If he feels like you do not have a right to survival and go on, what does he do? He automatically kicks it up to the Ancients of Days. That makes sense? So he can determine for you to go on, but he does not. He refuses to determine whether you stop. That makes sense?
Yeah. If I can make a couple of comments.
Sure.
The first one I will make is the justice that is being talked about here, and the way we view it in Israel is about the punishment. You have done wrong, you've got to be punished, right?
Yeah.
I suspect that when the higher level in the administration of the universe it gets to, that the justice aspect is not really motivated by the sake of punishment.
No,
for
it's
punishment.
not. It's mercy and love.
I think that's
Yeah.
right. I think it's probably motivated for the sake of teaching.
Yes.
Right? Because if you have done something wrong, it means something is not jiving, right? So I think the whole purpose is really what can we do to help so that there is the growth in the right direction.
That's right. And that happens all the way up to the mansion worlds, doesn't it? You think about it.
I suppose.
Yeah, before your guardian angel certifies you to go up to the next level, you have to meet certain requirements. And it's along the same line if you think about it, Jill, because in order for you to go from one mansion world to the next, you have to show a certain amount of progress. And that's what you're talking about, is progressing to the point where you're not, what? Cosmically insane. Because why else would you do things that was against everyone else unless you were cosmically insane? And that is interesting that if you look at the Lucifer rebellion, that's a local system problem. And it's at the we're going to find this out on Wednesday night when we study all the orders of days. It's the local system is the only one that does not have a full-time representative of the Trinity on staff all the time. They have like visiting representatives. So this cosmic insanity is a lot less likely to happen once you leave Salvington, or the local constellation, really, if you think about it. So
I think when it says in the universe judgment is vested in those who fully know the antecedents of all wrongdoing as well as its motivation, the higher level judicial systems would honor that. They would, because antecedent is actually the history of an individual, of the soul. So that is taken into consideration as well as its motivation, more so than it does here on the
Yeah.
in this particular.
We don't have justice on
We don't
this
have
planet.
justice because we
Yeah.
can't know, we have
No.
to go to so much research to
Yeah.
find out about someone's life, how they were raised, what they had
Yeah.
to deal with and everything, which on the higher levels, they have access to all that information almost
That's right.
instantly.
So
whereas
when we
don't
have courts, they're handicapped.
Right,
If you think
exactly.
about it, because
Yeah.
they don't have all the information, right? They don't know the motivation of the person, they don't know the background of the person, they don't know why they would react in such a way,
Right.
that sort of thing. So we have to take 12 people and make a decision kind of blindly, if you think about it.
And it's worse than that in some instances. The system is corrupted, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah, it is.
um,
That comes into it too.
that
Yeah,
comes
you got
in.
peer pressure on juries and they wanna get it done and they're, they all,
Yeah, and we have judges taking money and things like that, you know.
Well, the system wanting money out of this, but that's
Yeah,
the second comment I would like, well, to finish that first comment, there is still an aspect of that justice, which is when you realize that you have done something wrong and you have hurt someone, for example, or done something that is creating some chaos of some sort. Right? I think when you realize it as an individual, you want to do something to fix it. Right? So that I think that's the part of the justice as well, which is a fair action of some sort that helps you grow and understand, but in another way also kind of compensate for the trouble you have caused. Like if you create a wave, kind of the anti-wave or something. This being said, my second comment that I want to make is I noticed in those description, I don't know if it's because they voluntarily didn't say it or because it just didn't happen, but naturally, as witnessing such, or if I could, in such an event, I would want to teach the lad who is scared and to kind of help him grow and comfort him and to take this opportunity to kind of teach something and see if we can instill. And the same for, particularly for the aggressor, say, work with him and say, okay, guy, what's going on here? Can we like show some love and it looks, at least, I don't know if it happened or not, but it's not said that you just did anything along those lines. You just interfered, let one go, the other go in the other direction, and done.
yeah. Well, see, most of the time he does. He always talks to both parties
Right.
and figures out what's going on. Let's move on here to this picture here. I wanted to show you this. This is an Egyptian picture, well before Christ even came. But you can see the scales of justice here. You see that in this? Okay, so this concept of justice was passed down from whom? Melchizedek, right? I thought that was kind of interesting. All right, and this is about that. It says the weighing of the heart from the papyrus of, I can't even read that, early 22nd dynasty, about 930 BC. All right. And it goes on to say the admission to the kingdom of Orisis depended on the proper conduct during life to establish the moral and ethical character of the deceased. His or her heart was weighed in the balance of judgment against a figure representing Mat, the Egyptian concept of truth, order, and justice. The successful balance enabled the deceased to enter the afterlife. Failure resulted in the second death, total extinction of the individual. Where did you think that came from?
Melchizedek.
Melchizedek's teachings.
Where is that?
Right.
What is that?
Oh, let me go back one here. It's a picture. They're describing this here.
Oh, they're
When-
describing this picture.
Yeah, this picture, weighing of the heart.
And this writing is as of when?
930 BC. Okay, so this was 930 BC, before Christ. Okay.
And the Egyptian wrote that.
And the Egyptians wrote this. And of course, Orisis was their god, right? The kingdom of Orisis. Or Osiris, I'm sorry. All right. And let's keep going on. This is another depiction of a picture of justice. And then we go on here. Let me go to the next one. and we'll keep-
Yeah, that concept of judgment is in many religions, in particular Islamic
Yeah.
Christianity.
Okay, so let's go on to the next one here. Am I up next? All right, let me get to the proper place here. For days they talked about this problem of manifesting mercy and administering justice, and Ganid, at least in some extent, understood why Jesus would not engage in personal combat. He didn't, did he? He restrained the lad. But Ganid asked one last question, to which he never received a fully satisfactory answer, and that question was, but teacher, if a stronger and ill-tempered creature should attack you, and threatened to destroy you, what would you do? Would you make no effort to defend yourself? Although Jesus could not fully satisfactorily answer the lad's question, inasmuch as he was not willing to disclose that he himself, Jesus, was living on earth as an exemplification of the Paradise Father's love to an onlooking universe, he did say this much. Hang on, y'all. I'll go ahead and read the next paragraph too. Gain it. I can well understand how some of these problems perplex you, and I will endeavor to answer your question. First, in all attacks which might be made upon my person, I would determine whether or not the aggressor was a son of God, my brother in the flesh. And if I thought such a creature did not possess moral judgment and spiritual reasoning, I would unhesitantly defend myself to the full capacity of my powers of resistance, regardless of the consequences to the attacker. Isn't that interesting? But I would not thus assault a fellow man of sonship status, even in self-defense. That is, I would not punish him in advance without judgment for his assault upon me. I wouldn't by every possible artifice seek to prevent and dissuade him from making such an attack and to mitigate it in a case of my failure to abort it. Gain it. I have absolute confidence in my Heavenly Father's overcare. I am consecrated to the doing the will of my Father in heaven. I do not believe that real harm can befall me. I do not believe that my life work can really be jeopardized by anything my enemies might wish to visit upon me. And surely we have no violence to fear from our friends. I am absolutely assured that the entire universe is friendly to me. This all-powerful truth I insist on believing with a wholehearted trust in spite of all appearances to the contrary.
God, super.
Yeah.
Boy, you
Wish
get
that I
that
had that.
Yes, really. Now let's tear this apart just a little bit. First, he makes a differentiation between a son of God and a non-son of God.
Which he can.
Which he can.
We cannot
Yes.
with
We
the same
cannot only
assurance.
do that. That's right. So he knows whether his attacker is a son of God or is not a faith son of God, right? So a non-faith son of God, he would resist with all his might, right? Even to the downfall of that attacker, okay? That's what our military does, right? They defend us to the downfall of the attacker or themselves, right? But he will not, what? He will not punish someone before or during the trying to defend himself, right? You see the difference? So, and then you ask him, well, what about the end of his life? Okay? He perceived him leaving this planet, did he not? So he knew what was coming. But he did not resist because he felt like it was the will of the Father not to resist what was about to befall him, right? Remember in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he's falling on his knees and he asked the Father, please let me, if it be possible, please let this cup pass from me, you know? And basically, it did not, did it? So he knew it was the will of God that he finish his life like every other mortal. It was not the will of God that he be tortured, was it? It was only the will of God that he finish his life like every other mortal does. And many, many mortals goes through what? The crucifixion process, right? So we have to understand, now we see why Jesus was what? A pacifist, wasn't he? He never tried to defend himself past a certain point. The other thing is what? He was showing the whole world what a life of, as a believer, as a father, and a son of the universe would do, right? So he gives us an example, okay? Does that make sense?
Perfect example of love and mercy.
Perfect example of love and mercy. Okay. Sweetie, would you take the next one?
But Ganid was not fully satisfied. Many times they talked over these matters, and Jesus told him some of his boyhood experiences, and also about Jacob, the stonemason's son. On learning how Jacob appointed himself to defend Jesus, Ganid said, I begin to see. In the first place, very seldom would any normal human being want to attack such a kindly person as you. And even if anyone should be so unthinking as to do such a thing, there is pretty sure to be near at hand some other mortal who will fly to your assistance, even as you always go to the rescue of any person you observe to be in distress. In my heart, teacher, I agree with you, but in my head, I still think that if I had been Jacob, I would have enjoyed punishing those rude fellows, you bet, who presumed to attack you, just because they thought you would not defend yourself. I presume you are fairly safe in your journey through life, since you spend much of your time helping others and ministering to your fellows in distress. Well, most likely there will always be someone on hand to defend you. And Jesus replied, that test has not yet come. Ganid. And when it does, we will have to abide by the Father's will. And that was about all the lad could get his teacher to say on this difficult subject of self-defense and non-resistance. On another occasion, he did draw from Jesus the opinion that organized society had every right to employ force in the execution of its just mandates.
So he gives society the right to do this right there, doesn't he?
If it's not corrupted,
Huh?
yeah. If it's not corrupted, if it's
If
done
it's not corrupted, that's
with,
right.
with the right intent.
Right.
That's right. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Embarking at Tarentum. Pam, did you take that one?
While tarrying at the ship landing, waiting for the boat to unload cargo, the travelers observed a man mistreating his wife. As with his custom, Jesus intervened in behalf of the person subjected to attack. He stepped up behind the irate husband and, tapping him gently on the shoulder, said, "My friend, may I speak with you in private for a moment?" The angry man was nonplussed by such an approach, and after a moment of embarrassing hesitation, stammered out, why, yes, what do you want? What do you want with me?" When Jesus had led him to one side, he said, "My friend, I perceive that something terrible must have happened to you. I very much desire that you tell me what could happen to such a strong man to lead him to attack his wife, the mother of his children, and that right out here before all eyes. I am sure you must feel that you have some good reason for this assault. What did the woman do to deserve such a treatment from her husband? As I look upon you, I think I discern in your face the love of justice, if not the desire to show mercy. I venture to say that if you found me out by the wayside, attacked by robbers, you would unhesitatingly rush to my rescue. I dare say you have done many such brave things in the course of your life. Now, my friend, tell me, what is the matter? Did the woman do something wrong, or did you foolishly lose your head and thoughtlessly assault her?" It was not so much what he said that touched this man's heart as the kindly look and the sympathetic smile which Jesus bestowed upon him at the conclusion of his remarks. Said the man, "I perceive you are a priest of the cynics, and I am thankful you restrained."
Restrain me.
Restrain me. My wife has done no great wrong. She is a good woman, but she irritates me by the manner in which she picks on me in public, and I lose my temper. I am sorry for my lack of self-control, and I promise to try to live up to my former pledge to one of your brothers who taught me the better way many years ago. I promise you.
I think this is an instance where you could see in the soul of the person that he had,
Yeah.
a good
Yeah,
heart, and
yeah.
that so that was
Yeah. So he immediately, though, stepped up and stopped the assault, didn't he? Okay.
But
And-
the man's not apologizing to his wife though.
No, he's not, but that does not matter as much as the fact he realized he was wrong.
Yeah.
We don't know that what he has done after
We
that.
don't know. Well,
Still
we're
in
going
the
to
next
find out in the
paragraph,
next
yeah.
paragraph what actually happened. So we're gonna move on. Let's just go ahead and move on to the next paragraph. Mom, would you take that one?
I can hardly see it because
Well, if you
my eyes are
can't,
watering so
That's all
much.
right.
Let me
Jill,
read
would
it.
you take the next
I
one?
have dry eyes and they won't stop today.
And then, in bidding him farewell, Jesus said, "My brother, always remember that man has no rightful authority over woman unless the woman has willingly and voluntarily given him such authority. Your wife has engaged to go through life with you, to help you fight its battles, and to assume the far greater share of the burden of bearing and rearing your children. And in return for this special service, it is only fair that she receives. that she-
Receive from you.
Why no S? That she receive from you that
It's-
special. Huh?
It's not a plural. It's she receives it. She receives. She will receive from you.
Okay.
Okay.
It is only fair that she receive from you that special protection which man can give to woman as the product who must carry, bear, and nurture the children. The loving care and consideration which a man is willing to bestow upon his wife and their children are the measure of that man's attainment of the higher levels of creative and spiritual self-consciousness. Do you not know that man and woman are partners with God in that they cooperate to create beings who grow up to possess themselves of the potential of immortal souls? The Father in heaven treats the spirit matter of the children of the universe as one equal to himself. It is godlike to share your life and all that relates thereto on equal terms with another partner who so fully shares with you that divine experience of reproducing yourselves in the lives of your children. If you can only love your children of God as God loves you, you will love and cherish your wife as the Father in heaven honors and exalts the infinite spirit, the mother of all the spirit children of the vast universe.
Okay, so we have Jesus talking about God the Father and his relationship with what? The infinite spirit as a marriage, in essence, right? And that she or he, whatever you want to make it, is on equal footing with God the Father. Let's go one more step. The creative mother spirit of our local universe. What did Jesus do as soon as he finished his bestowal? The first thing he did was come back and elevate the creative mother spirit equal to himself, right? Because she's the equal partner with him in creating all things. Every single creator son does the same thing, okay? It's a marriage, right? The local universe mother spirit and the creator son, okay? So this is what they're talking about, this relationship between man and woman. When you make a commitment as a husband and wife, it is your responsibility to be treated equal, whether you're a man or a woman. If a woman takes a position where she's abusive to her husband, it's the same exact thing as a man being abusive to his wife. It's easier for the man to be more abusive. Why? Because the man is usually stronger, right, than the woman. But it is the woman, if you think about it, that's much stronger in many ways because she takes on the burden of having children, raising children, making sure they're educated and that sort of thing. And many men step out of that position, don't they? Instead of being active and helping out raising the children, right? But in essence, it's a partnership, an equal partnership. Okay? But I find it interesting that Jesus makes the example of the universal Father and the infinite Spirit here, just as he is equal partners with the local universe mother spirit.
But in I think it's chapter or paper 6, it talks about the eternal Son being also referred to as a universal mother.
He is.
So
Yeah. Okay, but it says the Son is the universal mother of all spirit personalities, right? The infinite Spirit is the mother of what? All ministering spirit children, right? That's the difference. But the creative Son, or the infinite Son, is the mother of all spirit personalities. So really, he takes it from the very beginning. Really, his job starts when you become what? That first stage spirit. Okay? Even though it goes all the way down to us, he really takes over as the first stage spirit, because you have developed from finite to morontial to spirit, right? And at that point, he is really considered your mother spirit. Okay?
Who creates the creator sons? Is it the Father and the Son?
Yeah.
Is it what it is?
Yeah.
Okay, and
The
then
Father and the Son is the mother and father of the Creator's Son.
and then the infinite spirit is the creator of the universe matter spirit.
That's right.
So
In liaison, though, with the Father.
right. Oh yes.
Okay?
Always.
Yeah.
So that's why that we see that pattern in the I think call it the Trinity. Right?
Yeah.
The and then we see that pattern in the local universe, and we see that pattern projection of the on the human worlds,
We do.
evolutional worlds as the family.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
The Trinity is always involved in everything, which is interesting if you think about it. The Father and the Son creating the first step down, the Creator Sons, right? And the Father and the Spirit really creates the other half of that. So we have the Trinity, and we have divinity stepping down one level. That's why they're called descending sons of God, right? They descend from God. Now, what's the difference between that and a Trinity origin being? They are created by the Trinity, all three parts of the Trinity, as perfected beings. But the descending sons do what? Gain experience. They're experiential son coming down. That's why we're considered ascending sons, because we start at the bottom, we ascend up to paradise, right? They come from paradise, come down, they're descending. If they come from finite and go up, they're ascending, right? The sons of God. All right, let's go on. Here. Millie, would you take that one?
As they went on board the boat, they looked back upon the scene of the teary-eyed couple standing in silent embrace. Having heard the latter half of Jesus' message to the man, Bernard was all day occupied with meditations thereon, and he resolved to reorganize his home when he returned to India.
So, what he told them took effect, didn't it? Okay. The journey to Nicopolis was pleasant but slow, as the wind was not favorable. The three spent many hours recounting their experiences in Rome and reminiscing about all that had happened to them since they first met in Jerusalem. Gained was becoming imbued with the spirit of personal ministry. He began work on the steward of the ship, but on the second day, when he got into deep religious water, he called on Joshua to help him out. You know, it's kind of funny mentioning here, how many of us, when we first start reading the book, we want to take around and hit it on everybody's head. You got to read this, you got to read this. Yeah, he did the same thing.
They spent several days at Nicopolis, the city which Augustus had founded some 50 years before as a city of victory, in commemoration of the Battle of Actium. This site being the land whereon he camped with his army before the battle. They lodged in the home of one Jeremy, a Greek proselyte of the Jewish faith, whom they had met on shipboard. The Apostle Paul spent all winter with the son of Jeremy in the same house in the course of his third missionary journey. From Nicopolis, they sailed on the same boat for Corinth, the capital of the Roman province of Achaia.
Isn't it interesting how many places that Jesus went that Paul ended up to?
He reaped the harvest.
He reaped the harvest, that's right. At Corinth. Penny, did you take
By the time they reached Corinth, Gained was becoming very much interested in the Jewish religion, and so it was not strange that one day as they passed the synagogue and saw the people going in, he requested Jesus to take him to the service. That day they heard a learned rabbi discourse on the destiny of Israel, and after the service they met one Crispus, the chief ruler of this synagogue. Many times They went back to the synagogue services, but chiefly to meet Crispus. Ganid grew to be very fond of Crispus, his wife, and their family of 5 children. He much enjoyed observing how a Jew conducted his family life.
It's kind of interesting that he basically, after listening to Joshua or Jesus teach him over and over, he became interested in the Jewish faith too. This is a picture of them at Corinth in the area in there. You can see Athens over to the right, and Thebes above that. But you can see that little landmass. That would be what we would consider Italy today, I think. So, all right. This is, shoot, I don't have my notes on this one. Let me do this, y'all, so I can show you all what this is about. Here we go. I have notes on all these. If I can get to one. Let me get the right mice going here. This is where the emperor started to convert this track into a canal, but not finish the job. This is where Caesar started a canal at Corinth. Okay, and this is another picture of the canal at Corinth. This one here is the Emperor Nero. He basically left his own image on the wall of the canal here, which I thought was pretty interesting. Let's keep going here. And this is another picture of that. They did a little bit better picture, close up of it right there. So
me concept.
me constantly. That's right. I thought that might find out interesting. Yeah. Let me see if I can hit the right button here. Here we go. All right.
I think I can see that now. I can't see the yellow
It's a little
line.
bigger one. Yeah.
While Gannon studied family life, Jesus was teaching Crispus the better way of religious living. Jesus had more than 20 sessions with this forward-looking Jew, and it was not surprising that years afterward, when Paul was preaching in this very synagogue, and when the Jews had rejected this message and had voted to forbid his further preaching in the synagogue, and when he then went to the Gentiles, that Crispus, with his entire family, embraced the new religion, and that he became one of the chief supports of the Christian church, which Paul
Subsequently.
organized at Corinth.
Corinth. Okay, and I got a few more pictures here to show you. Let me, if y'all don't mind, I'm going to stand up to do this because I cannot see these from over there. This is a modern church at Corinth, which I thought was kind of interesting. You can see the apostle. This is supposed to be Peter, I think, and Paul. It's outside of it. Okay. Let's keep going.
Read it.
You.
It's my turn.
Yep.
During the 18 months, Paul preached in Corinth, being later joined by Silas and Timothy. He met many others who had been taught by the Jewish tutor of the son of an Indian merchant. Jewish tutor of the son of an Indian merchant.
Yeah.
So that's a quote from the Bible or something.
Yeah, it is. Okay. You take the next one. We go to the next picture, please. Okay. Nellie, would you take the next one?
At Corinth, they met people of every race, hailing from 3 continents. Next to Alexandria and Rome, it was the most cosmopolitan city on the Mediterranean Empire. There was much to attract one's attention in this city, and Gannon never grew weary of visiting the citadel, which stood almost 2,000 feet above the sea. He also spent a great deal of his spare time about the synagogue and in the home of Crispus. He was at first shocked and later on charmed by the status of woman in the Jewish home. It was a revelation to this young Indian.
Okay. So would you take the next? Oh, no, I guess I'm not going. Jesus and Ganid were often guests in another Jewish home, that of Justus, a devout merchant who lived alongside the synagogue. And many times subsequently, when the Apostle Paul sojourned at his home, did he listen to the recounting of these visits with the Indian lad and his Jewish tutor. Well, both Paul and Justus wondered whatever became of such a wise and brilliant Hebrew teacher. So Paul heard the stories about Jesus, didn't he? Okay, you take the next one.
The picture we have here looks like the stained glass over at the Greek Orthodox Church on Claremont.
It does,
Yeah, it
doesn't it?
resembles it.
This is good. We could go ahead and look at some of these. These are just beautiful pictures of the church there, the Christian church at Corinth. This is the modern church. But I just thought they were so pretty that I'd include them in here. It's different. You can see the stained glass in the wall, in the walls and things. And the pictures, these are the apostles that's painted on the walls.
Who painted these pictures?
Huh?
You know who painted them?
No, I sure don't. It may be in the notes, but I can't get to the notes on this computer. But they have, some of them you can make out who they are from the inscription above them. But they were just gorgeous pictures, I thought, of the thing. That's Jesus calming the waters, you know, and the 12 apostles. It's interesting they have the 12 apostles. I guess this guy down in the bottom is supposed to be Jesus, but he looks pretty old for Jesus, doesn't he? Yeah.
I think he was probably the head of the church.
He probably was supposed to be Peter or something, 12 apostles. But, this is a battle helmet of Corinth. This was a 500 BCE bronze, and it's Greek. There's some other interesting thing, another bronze helmet. This is from 500 BC of the Greeks at Corinth. I put this in because I thought Pam might enjoy it. Some of the pottery. This is made about 760 BC. It's Corinthian pottery. And this is Corinthian humor. These are some more pottery, and there's a description about those. These are 530 BC, and this is the women making fun of the men drinking. So, you want me to read it to you?
Yeah.
Some Corinthian vessels were painted with original and caricature-like scenes. On a small dish, a woman aims the content of a cup at a duck in a washing basin while making fun of a typical male drinking game. Another dish shows Artemis and her hunting dog at an altar. On a cosmetics box, can't make it out, Heraclius draws water from a fountain made in Corinth about 430 BC, contributed by San Juan. So this is considered their humor. Okay, and this is some of the trim along the capital, which is kind of interesting. Made a nice. Look how intricate that is.
So that would be a Corinthian.
That's Corinthian stuff. Let me leave it there until we get there. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's keep going.
When in Rome, Ganid observed that Jesus refused to accompany them to the public baths. Several times afterwards, the young man sought to induce Jesus further to express himself in regard to the relations of the sexes. Though he would answer the lad's questions, he never seemed disposed to discuss these subjects at great length. One evening, as they strolled about Corinth, out near where the wall of the citadel ran down to the sea, they were accosted by two public women. Ganid had imbibed the idea, and rightly, that Jesus was a man of high ideals, and that he abhorred everything which partook of uncleanliness or savored of evil. Accordingly, he spoke sharply to these women and rudely motioned them away. When Jesus saw this, he said to Ganid, "You mean well, but you should not presume thus to speak to the children of God, even though they chance to be his erring children. Who are we that we should sit in judgment on these women? Do you happen to know all of the circumstances which led them to resort to such methods of obtaining a livelihood? Stop here with me while we talk about these matters. The courtesans were astonished at what he said even more than was gaining.
Okay, so he basically attacked the courtesans, right? The women, offering themselves for money. And Jesus reminded him that these are two, children of God. It's all about respect, respecting your brothers and sisters. Okay? Would you take it from there, Pam?
As they stood there in the moonlight, Jesus went on to say, there lives within
Lives.
there lives within every human mind a deep spirit, the gift of the Father in heaven. This good spirit ever strives to lead us to God, to help us to find God and to know God. But also within mortals, there are many natural physical tendencies which the Creator put there to serve the well-being of the individual and the race. Now, oftentimes, men and women become confused in their efforts to understand themselves and to grapple with the manifold difficulties of making a living in a world so largely dominated by selfishness and sin. I perceive, Gained, that neither of these women is willfully wicked. I can tell by their faces that they have experienced much sorrow. They have suffered much at the hands of an apparently cruel fate. They have not intentionally chosen this sort of life. They have, in discouragement bordering on despair, surrendered to the pressure of the hour and accepted this distasteful means of obtaining a livelihood as the best way out of a situation that to them appeared hopeless. Gained, some people are really wicked at heart. They deliberately choose to do mean things. But tell me, as you look into these now tear-stained faces, do you see anything bad or wicked? And as Jesus paused for his reply, Gained's voice choked up as he stammered out his answer. No, teacher, I do not, and I apologize for my rudeness to them. I crave their forgiveness. Then said Jesus, and I bespeak for them that they have forgiven you, as I speak for my Father in heaven, that he has forgiven them. Now, all of you, come with me to a friend's house where we will seek refreshment and plan for the new and better life ahead. Up to this time, the amazed women had not uttered a word. They looked at each other and silently followed as the men led the way.
Okay, a couple things I want to point out on this paragraph that I think is important. And that is first that it talks about in the previous paragraphs here, Jesus would not go to the public baths because of the promiscuity in the public baths. But he says here, okay, in this particular paradise, that many natural physical tendencies which the Creator gave them to serve the well-being of the individual and the race. What are they talking about there? They're talking about desire, right? Sexual desire. And these things are not bad if they're kept in the proper perspective, right? Just because you have desires for your wife or your husband, that's the way it's supposed to be. That is ingrained in your makeup as a human being. What do they do that? It's for the reproduction of the races, right? Reproduction of people. If we did not desire one another, would we have any children? No. So it works for the benefit of not only ourselves, but the benefit of mankind in the universe.
I think the benefit, so there is the benefit for the race, which is the reproduction part of it, so that we don't die, right?
That's right.
So that we can grow. But I think the personal benefit is about the same way we have the urge of being like adventurous. We want to discover things. We have the urge of being social, right? I think that urge is in a way, in that concept of partnership we talked about, is to encourage us to go for that partnership that is so difficult, right? Because men and women are so different and so challenging. But that's what one of the urges that pushes us to seek that changing relationship that's so beneficial to us as an experience as well.
That's right. And the difference is what Jesus is pointing out here is this. Those desires are natural, but they should be natural within what? A relationship, right? A love relationship with someone you have committed as a partner, right? So the desire is not wrong. It's when it becomes a problem is when that desire goes outside your commitment, your relationship with your own partner. You follow me? That's when it gets into that possibility of going into what? Evil, right? Because then you start to use people. You know, sexual use is just as bad as you go out and you start beating people up, if you think about it. If you're not considering the reactions and what happens to those people that you abuse like that, then you're just as bad as they are. You follow me?
Yeah, but if I may say, there is a part of it that is not necessarily bad in the sense that people can engage into sexual relationship, not really care about founding a family, but no one is really abusing the other.
No,
But
if both parties are agreed to it.
that's right. Not in an abusive, but and
Yeah.
this happens a fair amount, right?
Yeah.
But so this is not evil in the sense of you are doing
No.
bad things. However, it's still not dominated by the higher concept
No.
of what it was meant to be,
Yeah.
and so even though you are not hurting anyone, you are living at the lower level of the
animal
ladder,
the animal nature rather
more closer to the animal nature
than, yeah.
than making something out of it in terms of like, which is what you do when you make a family, have that commitment, go through the struggle, having children,
Yeah.
and
Or
raising them.
and even just benefiting your relationship with your partner. You know, I mean that's part of it too.
That's the point, because, and I know some close people who have done that, and this is a poor relationship. It's not really a relationship. It's let's have some fun. It's like you go, you have a drink, you are not sober, so you cannot have a very meaningful discussion, and it's very near animal. Nothing necessarily bad in terms of hurting people as long as you
Well,
try
it is if you start reproducing children from it.
That's right.
That's the thing.
That's where you're out of the, because when you don't follow the and you don't try to follow the universal pattern and the divine leadership, then which is the case in that you end up causing some evil,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But it can be, the worst part is when you actually use people and you force them
Yeah.
and things like that. To a lower extent is just have some fun.
Well,
And the
you know-
highest is when you actually try to follow the pattern and build a relationship that's feminine.
Well, I'll take it one step further. Just having some fun is what we consider just having some fun, though, can have devastating reactions to someone who are saying they're out to just have fun, but actually it affects them mentally and socially, things like that. So, you know, you have to be real careful where you step over that line and say, is this really correct to do this? You know, each person has to make their own decision about that.
You know, since we're on this subject, one thing that I just can't understand is the enormous amount of priests who have molested children.
Yes.
You know, I just don't, are they all, is it because there's...
No, it's very simple. I think there's a very simple explanation. Is when you deny your sexual urges, you get frustrated.
But why didn't they go for women? Why they go for boys? You know,
I don't know.
Access,
But
probably.
yeah, it's probably they are easier to manipulate. They
Yeah.
have a hard time to get the woman, and they see the young children, and
Plus, an adult has enough sense to say no. A child does not always.
Yeah.
You know.
But I mean, you have to really be sick.
Yeah, it's a sick
To,
thing. Period. I don't
you
know
know.
if everybody says. Sweetie, would you go on to the next slide? Let's move on
Sorry.
because we're still on the same thing here. Just change this. Imagine. One more slide. There we go.
Imagine the surprise of Justus' wife when at this late hour Jesus appeared with Ganid and these two strangers, saying, "You will forgive us for coming at this hour, but Ganid and I desire a bite to eat, and we would share it with these our newfound friends, who are also in need of nourishment. And besides all this, we come to you with the thought that you will be interested in counseling with us as to the best way to help these women get a new start in life. They can tell you their story, but I surmise they have had much trouble, and their very presence here in your house testifies how earnestly they crave to know good people, and how willingly they will embrace the opportunity to show all the world, and even the angels of heaven, what brave and noble women they can become."
Okay. I think we skipped over everybody, didn't we? Mom, would you take the next one? Sorry, Pam.
Yeah.
I think Mom was next.
When Martha, Justus' wife, had spread the food on the table, Jesus, taking unexpected leave of them, said, "As it is getting late, and since the young man's father will be awaiting us, we pray to be excused while we leave you there together, 3 women, the beloved children of the Most High, and I will pray for your spiritual guidance while you make plans for a new and better life on earth and eternal life in the great beyond."
Okay, so let's get this picture. Jesus takes these 2 wayward women to his friend's house, right? And it's late in the evening, and says, ask her, well, could she, feed the group because it was late, well knowing that he was planning on leaving them there, It's kind of interesting how he set them up for this, right? So that these women could get some help.
Did we know Jesus could be devious?
Looks like he was pretty smart. Let's go on to the next one. Jill, would you take the next one?
Thus did Jesus and Gaining take leave of the woman. So far the 2 courtesans had said nothing. Likewise was Gaining speechless, and for a few moments so was Martha. But presently she rose to the occasion, and did everything for these strangers that Jesus had hoped for. The elder of these 2 women died a short time thereafter, with bright hopes of eternal survival, and the younger woman worked at Justus' place of business, and later became a lifelong member of the first Christian church in Corinth.
So it changed both their lives forever. Plus it did what? It gave Martha an opportunity to what? Serve. Right? The genius of Jesus sometimes is just amazing to me. Okay.
It's kind of like what you do, Millie, with opening your house to people that need places to live.
That's right. That's right. Okay, this is that slide. So let's go on.
Several times in the home of Crispus, Jesus and Gaining met one Gaius. Is that how you say that?
Let me look.
Who subsequently became a loyal supporter of Paul. During these 2 months in Corinth, they held intimate conversations with scores of worthwhile individuals, and as a result of all these apparently casual contacts, more than half of the individuals so affected became members of the subsequent Christian community.
See how many people Jesus touched that became part of the Christian church? Right. When Paul first went to Corinth, he had not intended to make a prolonged visit, but he did not know how well the Jewish tutor had prepared the way for his labors. And further, he discovered that great interest had already been aroused by Aquila and Priscilla. Aquila being one of the cynics with whom Jesus had come in contact when in Rome. This couple were Jewish refugees from Rome, and they quickly embraced Paul's teachings. He lived with them and worked with them, for they were also tent makers. It was because of these circumstances that Paul prolonged his stay in Corinth. Notice here that they talk about Aquila and Priscilla, 2 women, right?
They were tent makers.
They were tent makers that Jesus tutored. You follow that? Okay, so Jesus touched women all along the way too, training them as he trained the men. Okay?
Is that a pigeon on top of that?
That's a pigeon on top of that. We're going to get to that. All right.
For personal work in Corinth, Jesus and Gainan had many more interesting experiences in Corinth. They had close converse with a great number of persons who greatly profited by the instruction received from Jesus.
The miller he taught about grinding up the grains of truth in the mill of living experience so as to render the difficult things of divine life readily receivable by even the weak and feeble among one's fellow mortals. Said Jesus, give the milk of truth to those who are babes in spiritual perception. In your living and loving ministry, serve spiritual food in attractive form and suited to the capacity of receptivity of each of your inquirers.
Mom, would you like to take that?
to the Roman
Centurion.
centurion, he said, "Render unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things which are God's. The sincere service of God and the loyal service of Caesar do not conflict against Caesar, should presume to arrogate to himself that homage which alone can be claimed by deity.
Yeah.
Loyalty to God, if you should come to know him, would enter you all the more royal and faithful in your devotion to a worthy inferior."
So he said, render thing that which is Caesar's unto Caesar, and God and unto God. So as long as Caesar did not assume to take on the role of God or the worship of God, he had no problem with giving Caesar the due he had coming, right?
And if he's worthy, right?
If he's
Because even you're
worthy.
worthy, because you can do a lot of bad things without claiming being God, right?
That's
So-
right. That's right. Would you take the next one?
To the earnest leader of the Mithraic cult, he said, "You do well to seek for a religion of eternal salvation, but you err to go in quest for such glorious truth among man-made mysteries and human philosophies. Know you not that the mystery of eternal salvation dwells within your own soul? Do you not know that the God of heaven has sent his Spirit to live within you, and that this Spirit will lead all truth-loving and God-serving mortals out of this life and through the portals of death up to the eternal heights of light where God waits to receive his children? And never forget, you who know God are the sons of God if you truly yearn to be like him."
Okay, so he mentions the thought adjuster right there in that, doesn't he? That these men are seeking for salvation when salvation exists within them, right? That Spirit of God, that thought adjuster. Okay.
To the Epicurean teacher, he said, "You do well to choose the best and esteem the good, but are you wise when you fail to discern the greater things of moral life, which are embodied in the spirit realms, derived from the realization of the presence of God in the human heart? The great thing in all human experience is the realization of knowing the God whose spirit lives within you and seeks to lead you forth on that long and almost endless journey of attaining the personal presence of our common Father, the God of all creation, the Lord of the universes."
And he's talking about, again, the ascension plan and the adjuster, right?
Do we know out of all those quotes which one are revelatory, meaning they are come from the ancient book and not anywhere else, versus taken from other places like maybe the Bible? Or
I do not know that. There may be a document somewhere in probably, it would probably be in the fellowship rather than the foundation, that someone has put a list such as that together, but I don't know about it off the top of my head. I don't remember ever reading it. So, there is a list out there that tells where all the quotes from, they took over 1,000 or 1,200 quotes from writings and individuals and put it in the book. We know that, and there is a list of those on the foundation or fellowship site. But I don't know about just the purely revelatory ones for sure. There's so much revelatory in it though, of lost knowledge, especially in the history of the planet. It might be just too big to compile.
it's very intertwined too.
Yeah, it's very Okay, who's next? Me, right? To the Greek contractor and builder, he said, "My friend, as you build the material structures of men, grow a spiritual character in the similitude of the divine spirit within your soul. Do not let your achievement as a temporal builder outrun your attainment as a spiritual son of the kingdom of heaven. While you build the mansions of times for another, neglect not to secure your title to the mansions of eternity for yourself. Ever remember, there is a city whose foundations are righteousness and truth, and whose builder and maker is God." Talk about the mansion worlds, isn't he? Okay. Nice again here.
To the Roman judge he said, "As you judge men, remember that you yourself will also someday come to judgment before the bar of the rulers of the universe. Judge justly, even mercifully, even as you shall someday thus crave merciful consideration at the hands of the supreme arbiter. Judge as you would be judged under similar circumstances, thus being guided by the spirit of the law as well as by its letter. And even as you accord justice dominated by fairness in the light of the need of those who are brought before you, so shall you have the right to expect justice tempered by mercy, when you sometimes stand before the judge of all the earth."
Ancients of days, right? So judge as if you wanted to be judged. Okay? Pam, take the next one.
To the mistress of the Greek inn he said, "Minister your hospitality as one who entertains the children of the Most High. Elevate the drudgery of your daily toil to the high levels of the fine art through the increasing realization that you minister to God in the persons whom he indwells by his Spirit, which has descended to live within the hearts of men, thereby seeking to transform their minds and lead their souls to the knowledge of the Paradise Father of all these bestowed gifts of the divine Spirit."
Notice it's a woman he's teaching again here, right? The mistress of the inn, right? The Greek inn. All right.
He's encouraging them every time
Yes.
to, as part of their daily labor, to put in their social context, to put a spiritual touch
In
their
their
life,
lives,
in their
right.
relationships.
Y'all, all the writing in Jesus is yellow today. I changed it from red because we were having such a hard time seeing it in the slides against the blue background, so that's why all his words are yellow. So does this make it a little easier? Hopefully
it
we
is a
will
lot
be able to
easier.
pick it up on the video a little better too. So, okay, Mom, would you like
Jesus had many visits with a Chinese merchant, and saying goodbye to his
admonished him?
admonished him, "Worship only God, who is your true spirit ancestor. Remember that the Father Spirit ever lies within you and always points your soul direction heavenward. If you follow the unconscious leading of this immoral spirit, you are certain to contain on to the uplift way of finding God. And when you do obtain the Father in heaven, it will be because of seeking him you have become more and more like him. And so farewell, Chang, but only for a reason, for we shall meet again in the worlds of light, where the Father of spirit souls has provided many delightful shopping places for those who are paradise bound."
What's he talking about? The ascension plan, isn't he? Right?
But what are, stopping places? Okay.
Many stopping places.
Many
That's-
mentions.
Many mansions, many worlds.
Many worlds, yeah.
Right? Along the way to heaven.
Delightful stuff.
Delightful things.
Disconcerting though on the previous page. Almost endless journey.
Almost endless journey. That's right. to paradise.
Endless.
Takes a long time to get there. What's that say I said yesterday? I don't know where I am, but I know where I'm going and where I've been.
And the thing is, once we have reached that destination, which is very long but a finite amount of time,
Yeah.
right? Well, there's still more to go. There is
Yeah.
infinite work to be done
Yeah. Never stops.
afterwards.
That's right.
It's just different levels, level after level.
That's right. All right, would you take the next one?
To the traveler from Britain, he said, "My brother, I perceive you are seeking for truth, and I suggest that the Spirit of the Father of all truth may chance to dwell within you. Did you ever sincerely endeavor to talk with the spirit of your own soul? Such a thing is indeed difficult and seldom yields consciousness of success, but every honest attempt of the material mind to communicate with its indwelling spirit meets with certain success, notwithstanding that the majority of such magnificent human experiences must long remain as superconscious registrations in the souls of such God-knowing mortals."
So he's talking about the thought adjuster talking to us, isn't he? Okay? But he says here that these long remain as what? Super conscious registrations. In other words, we're not aware of these. Okay? So,
But someone's keeping account.
someone's keeping account. That's right. So when you get to the mansion worlds, those registrations, those super conscious registrations, you'll have memory of. That makes sense? Because
Well,
the adjuster is teaching you.
yeah, that's right. But yes, but what he's saying is that I think another facet, I guess, is I think when he's talking about some aspects that is going on in our consciousness, we don't realize that some of it comes from that indwelling spirit. We will, and he's saying, and I guess he's alluding to the fact that at some point we will realize that, probably for what we didn't realize, and also on a continuing basis, the higher level you are spiritually, the more you realize you can discern what comes from your full adjuster versus not.
That's why he says the majority of those.
Yes.
There's some of them that does come through. You got something to say, Mom?
Well, I was wondering about Britain. Was there such a place as Britain
Yeah.
in 1475? Is that what that?
Well, no.
date
This would be 27 AD,
About 2,000 years ago.
about 2,000 years ago. But there was a continent of it was considered Britain. You know, it was just a big landmass. You know, which included what? That would be
What we call
Ireland,
today France and Ireland.
Scotland, Ireland, Britain, all of them.
Not France, I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah, not France.
Britain and France, not the same name.
But they considered it a continent.
Yeah.
You know, it was under the jurisdiction of Rome, though. Okay. All right, Millie.
To the runaway lad, Jesus said, "Remember, there are two things you cannot run away from, God and yourself. Wherever you may go, you take with you yourself and the Spirit of the Heavenly Father which lives in your heart. My son, stop trying to deceive yourself. Settle down to the courageous practice of facing the facts of life. Lay firm hold on the assurances of sonship with God and the certainty of eternal life, as I have instructed you. From this day on, purpose to be a real man, a man determined to face life bravely and intelligently."
And that works with what? People considering suicide also, right? You need to stop whimpering and saying, "Oh, woe is me." You need to get on with your life. Life is hard. You need to grab your bootstraps and go and do the best you can. And you know that God goes with you and you have an eternal life. So why worry about the temporal things or the things that's going on right this second? Right? And I think that's great advice, especially for young people. They want to get away. They want to run away from mom and dad. They want to get away from everything, right? School and the teacher and their friends and
Yeah, they want. I mean, as human beings, we are in a way lazy,
Yeah, we are.
right? So
Yeah.
we want the easy way out. And in my perspective, I guess, is that some of the hardship that we have, some of the pure physical challenge that we have, like just making a living, getting food, growing, and so on and so forth, is kind of way to push us. We've got to work, otherwise it's not going to come to you. So it's kind of go out there.
Yeah. All right, let's keep going. To the condemned criminal, this one's interesting. He said at the last hour, so he was counseling someone who's about to die, right? "My brother, you have fallen on evil times. You lost your way, you became entangled in the meshes of crime. From talking to you, I well know that you did not plan to do this thing which you are about to cost you your life, your temporal life. But you did do this evil, and your fellows have adjudged you guilty. They have determined that you shall die." Jesus is not interfering here, right? "You or I may not deny the state this right of self-defense in the manner of its own choosing. There seems to be no way of humanly escaping the penalty of your wrongdoing. Your fellows must judge you by what you did, but there is a judge to whom you may appeal for forgiveness, and who will judge you by your real motives and better intentions. You need not fear to meet the judgment of God if your repentance is genuine and your faith sincere. The fact that your error carries with it the death penalty imposed by men does not prejudice the chance of your soul to attain justice and enjoy mercy before the heavenly courts. So even though this man was about to die for something he did in this world, we don't know what it is. He
But
doesn't.
apparently bad.
Huh?
Apparently bad.
Apparently bad. Jesus is telling him, you can still obtain forgiveness from the heavenly courts or the heavenly Father, right? So even though you're about to lose your life because your fellows have judged you that what you did was worth taking your life, and there's nothing that can be done about that. So what he's basically saying is ask for repentance and forgiveness from the judges of eternity, and you will survive and go on. Right?
Does Jesus ever say anything about corporal punishment?
No.
No?
Not outside of this. In other words, he leaves it up to society, the courts, to decide what we consider a penalty worth dying for. He does not interfere. He doesn't feel one way or another. He does not interfere. The system
Part
is
of
set
our
up.
growth
It's part of our growth process.
as
So,
we decide what's right and wrong.
as children of God, we have to know if we do these things that's wrong, we're going to pay a penalty of this.
And that's also an opening for prison ministry.
That
too,
is.
for other people.
It is.
And I have struggled so much with that question with respect to my kids. Not with the older kids. Now, my younger one is 8 years old. That's okay. He has reached state where we can talk. And I don't think I will ever. But when you have like a 2, 3, 4 years old, and you cannot reason with them, this has been extremely challenging a few times. It's like, and the worst part is, thank God I have not resorted to that often, and not in a bad way. Unfortunately, the very rare few times that I did resort of it worked better than anything else. So
It's the punishment aspect of
this
it.
is the punishment. That doesn't mean that I was right.
Yeah.
My point is that personally, in my personal life, struggled big times, and the more I think about it, the more I don't like it, and the more I kind of regret, even though it seemed to have worked, kind of regret the few times I resorted to that with my children.
It's almost like you want them to come around to understanding without using,
I think there are some other way to instill the righteous discipline to unruly kids. Definitely, after the age they start to reason and they can, they have the thought adjuster. Definitely after that, for sure.
Yeah.
That I have no doubt. But I suspect, even though I failed a few times, I suspect even before there are ways that are probably higher level than resorting to corporal, and certainly not the harsh one that really injures. Right? Definitely that
Yeah.
no. But even the symbol of it.
Well, fear is a great motivator of people, period. Look how the church has controlled the human population for thousands of years through fear. The fear of hell, right? The fear of the retribution of God. We first learn fear of God before we learn love of God. And it's the same way with children. They almost have to go through that same process as we do as adults, going through the fear-based, I won't do this because I'm afraid what might happen, to the love-based, I won't do this because it will disappoint my parents, type of thing. So they learn just like we have as a society, if you think about it. First you start them out, they won't do something because you point your finger at them and say, if you do that, I'm going to spank you,
Right.
that sort of thing. And then when they get to a certain point, they start reasoning out. That thought adjuster comes in, they start reasoning out. And at that point you can say, do you love Pop, Mom, and Dad? You really disappoint us, And sometimes that's a better motivator sometimes than the fear-based. But it's learning the difference between the fear-based and the love-based,
Well, when you're raised by parents who are, let me put it this way, more ignorant,
Yeah.
then that fear base is very, very strong.
And it stays.
And it stays. And
Yeah.
if you think your father's going to kill you if you do something wrong,
Yeah.
you're not going to do it because you know that you're going to be
Beat.
beaten.
Yeah.
But that's the wrong reason for not doing
I know,
it.
but I'm
That's
just saying.
exactly the
but-
wrong reason for
yes.
not doing it. Yeah.
And so perhaps it's a good time to mention one of my experiences at the UNCHA conference in Amherst. I spent only one day, but the first session I went to was actually about family and raising kids. You know what's and the work, the outreach ministry, and the work that the truth seekers are doing. This is an organization that is Urantia based. There are, I think, most of the people are from Colorado. And I actually have a jump drive from the material that gave me that I haven't evaluated. But
By the way, at home, that link is on our website too. For
truth
the,
seekers,
yeah,
okay.
and it's the young people's group,
But
basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
young people.
Yeah, it started out as a young people,
Teenagers.
teenagers
Not
group.
young.
Yeah,
Well,
but they have their own website. We have a link on our under children's corner. There's a link to that my website.
and that particular ministry that I'm referring to, it was twofold. One person was dealing with age 0 to 8, so the very young kids, and about the process and the loving ways, and then there was another person who was presenting the older times and how they developed some kind of a program to instill service and how to work with the challenges of life, and in a very practical way. Again, I haven't evaluated for myself and implemented as yet, but I can say for sure a couple of things. First, it was very, it touched me very deeply, and in particular the love motivation behind the way to deal with kids, and I suspect that I'm going to discover a lot of and learn a lot out of that. And I think the fact that simply by looking at what other people have done and have tried and tested, instead of doing all on my own or trying and struggling, and I think I can get some good ideas, and I intend to do that. So
It's like you need a manual of life almost for
Right.
children. You know?
and
And that's why we keep talking about this, that it's the primer for the universe. Because it starts us out with spiritual thought, preparing us for what? Death, for the next step, to build our Morancha Moda. So, and that's really what you're talking about, Jill, is having instructions that other people have gone through these things, and having references that you can go back and say, well, how did they deal with these issues and that sort of thing.
because if you think about it, when you go into your job, right, you have been trained. You go to
Yeah.
school, you go to the whatever you went through. You are learned from other people who have tried to do that. You don't start from scratch. You know how to reinvent the wheel. You learn from what your ancestors have done, and then you build, you use, and improve upon if you can.
Yeah.
Right? But in our life, I mean, I guess the same thing is done in many churches in terms of trying to prepare you for.
Well, Adam and Eve did that. Theirs was what? They had classes for young people to teach them how to come along in not only spiritual things, but physical things too. So they got trained
Right.
from a young age along the best ways to do things. And we've lost that because we've lost Adam and Eve. But if that would have continued on, we should have had major centers of places where people could go learn how to teach their children, what to
Exactly.
do, and that sort of thing.
Exactly, and personally, certainly I've had maybe a little bit from my parents, mostly by example, which was not always a great example, and that's it. I guess people who have grown into some good churches probably have had better family, probably have had better opportunities, but I think there is a big need for leveraging, leveraging what people have found by experience from the spiritual motivation, and this is what those guys I'm finding have done. So
That's good.
just,
And you're saying that it's sort of based in Colorado,
yeah,
that they're practicing?
Yeah, it's called
Which is-
Urantia Now is one of the links, and they have all the links to the.
yeah, Truth Seekers. I don't think Truth Seekers is Urantia Now. Urantia Now is the.
Well, they have links to it on.
Well, I'm sure they all link to
Yeah.
each other.
on
But
the
Truth
website.
Seeker, I think it started in Boulder, Colorado. There are some other people. Actually, the who was dealing with the age 0 to 8. She doesn't live in Colorado, but she's compiled a lot of material. She has her own website, and she wants to. And actually, both of them, but particularly the person who showed me or indicated, though she didn't specifically talk about corporal punishment, but how much there was love in the way she was advocating. There was clearly. I don't think there is room for corporal punishment in her perspective in what she's so
Right, yeah.
for children.
Let's keep going on here. We're getting way off
I'm
track.
interested in that.
I have the.
Oh, you the
I have a
next-
jump drive. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if I'm the next reader, but
I think I am.
Are you the next one?
Jesus enjoyed many intimate talks with a large number of hungry souls, too many to find a place in this record. The three travelers enjoyed their sojourn in Corinth, excepting Athens, which was more renowned as an educational center. Corinth was the most important city in Greece during these Roman times, and their 2-month stay in this thriving commercial center afforded opportunity for all three of them to gain much valuable experience. Their sojourn in this city was one of the most interesting of all their stops on the way back from Rome.
Okay, let's get this last paragraph on, and we're going to stop after this.
Gonon had many interests in Corinth, but finally his business was finished, and they prepared to sail for Athens. They traveled on a small boat which could be carried overland on the land track from one of Corinth's harbors to the other, a distance of 10 miles. Interesting.
Okay, and this is in Athens, and we'll cover that on our next session, next Sunday, right? So we'll start on section 5 next Sunday. Can you remember that, dear? Athens discourse on science. Let's say a little prayer, and we'll quit for the day. Diane, would you like to pray for us, dear?
Dear Heavenly Father, our hearts are so grateful for the information that we have received from this study today. We thank you for the knowledge and the time that Roger's put in to present these lessons to us. We're just so very grateful for the revelation that came through so many years ago and that is preparing us for our journey to the mansion worlds and our ascending program into eternity, into paradise and onward. It is in your name, Jesus Christ, Michael, we pray and give thanks. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for joining us at home. Please come see us again. God bless you. You stop again.
Shoe.
Each of these little things
Shoe.
gave us a